Welcome friends to another r/malicious compliance video. If helping people is something you strive to do, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. That said, our first story of the day is by Sudden Pineapple 821. The time my buddy left a loaded semi-truck halfway across the country. For background, my buddy is my now husband's best friend. They met while overseas and have been best friends and roommates on and off basically until we bought our own home. They're basically brothers and quite the package deal. Anyway, I'll call my buddy Mac. Mac was an over-the-road trucker at the time this happened and was working for an entry-level company. Those companies have their place since they help people acquire a CDL and the first year or two of experience, so that other companies will be able to accept you. Insurance reasons mostly. Unfortunately, the downside to companies like these are as follows. 1. Inexperienced drivers. 2. Many of the instructors are also fairly inexperienced. 3. Pay is mediocre for industry standards. And 4. The dispatchers often ask for unreasonable/undrivable tasks. They don't award home time very easily, and you're basically just a number. We generally put up with companies like this at first to get our feet wet and gain those precious miles and years to make us more hireable down the road, so to speak. Anyway, Mac had been driving for this company for approximately a year when he was at the time halfway across the country from his home base when he got a phone call. His best friend, my current husband, was in the hospital with a potentially fatal infection. Mac immediately called dispatch to inform them that he was making an immediate U-turn and heading straight home. Here's where the compliance comes in. They told him that if he deviates from his route in any way that he would be fired immediately. They didn't care that he might lose his best friend and told him to suck it up and do his job. He said, "Fine, I quit." He pulled over at the nearest truck stop, parked the truck thousands of miles from his home base, and left it. He cleaned it out and took a Greyhound home if memory serves. His old company had to have his tractor and fully loaded trailer towed thousands of miles. Not only that, but they were late on the precious delivery of what was in his trailer. Let me tell you, nothing about that was cheap. Mac now works for a smaller family-owned company and is home daily or at least every weekend and is paid much better. Hope you enjoyed. This story always cracks me up. If you got news that somebody very close to you, whether it's friends or family, were in a tough situation in the hospital, but your job said, no, you can't go visit them right now, you've got to do your job. In that situation, would you be willing to quit your job? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by Initial Rope 8631. Complain about not getting free hits even though you had the advantage? You just cost your team a place in the grand final. Context: I'm a field hockey umpire. Generally, if someone's been fouled but they're able to retain possession or have a chance to score a goal, I'm allowed to call play on if there's sufficient advantage. So I was umpiring a semifinal, and there was a certain person we'll call Bob who would constantly complain that he was getting fouled all the time. Bob was a very good player, so the opposition would always gang up on him when he had the ball. Because he's very skilled, a lot of the time when he was fouled, he was able to dribble past the opposition and get the ball into his attacking area, or be able to have a shot on the goal. As I already mentioned, Bob was a complainer. He'd constantly cry about the free hits he should have been awarded, while completely disregarding the fact that he'd gained the advantage and even scored a goal when I let the play go on after he was fouled. At halftime, his team was losing 2-1. Bob comes up to me and starts ranting about how useless my umpiring is and that I missed lots of fouls on him. I assured him that I saw those fouls, but I let play go on and that he gained sufficient advantage, so I was confused as to why he was complaining. He then said, "You have to call every foul." I said, "Okay, I'll make sure that I call every foul." Malicious compliance mode activated. During the second half, I made sure that I called every foul for Bob's team, regardless if they had advantage or not. They then had to bring the ball back to the spot of the foul. Meanwhile, it gave the opposition time to get back and organize their defense. His teammates were getting very frustrated, but he was content knowing that he had got his way. Until there were about 3 minutes left in the game. Bob had the ball at the top of the circle. He was about to have a shot on goal when the opposition fouled him. When his stick was swung back, I blew my whistle as quickly as I could. Then half a second later, he hit the ball and it goes sailing into the net. Because I'd already blown my whistle, I had stopped play and the goal was not allowed. Bob was irate. He comes storming towards me yelling, "Why didn't you play the advantage?" I replied, "You said that I had to call every foul, and that's exactly what I've been doing this entire second half. That was a foul, so I called it." Bob continues ranting and starts cussing, so I told him that I wasn't tolerating his dissent and gave him a yellow card, a 5-minute suspension, meaning he was going to miss out on the last few minutes of the game. His team was still losing 2-1. If I had let the advantage play, the score would have been 2-2, and the game might have gone into extra time, meaning that his team would have had a chance to win and take part in next week's grand final. But because I maliciously complied with his request, and Bob's team were down to 10 men, he had to sit and watch his team lose the game and their place in the grand final, all because he wouldn't let me play advantage. As a referee, there is no winning. You could probably call just about the most perfect game of your life, and one side will always find some way to just throw a bunch of blame, try to make you feel bad, insult you. So I get why it's really easy to give in to players that are complaining in your face like that. That said though, as a fan of sports myself, I know that if I was ever watching a game, I'd rather the ref just try to stay as consistent as possible. Mixing up your refereeing style because somebody complained to you, to me, that's not the right way to handle it, but I'm not the ref. And maybe me saying that just proves there's just no winning as a referee. This next story is by G Money Money G. Demand I don't keep your phone? Okay. This was a long time ago, but something similar happened to me last week and reminded me of this story. Thought you might enjoy. My wife and I were going through airport security in Dallas, put all our stuff in our bins, unpacked our computers, empty our pockets, took off our shoes, belt, etc. Standard procedure, pretty mindless. We get through the X-ray and gather up our things. If you've been to Dallas, you often have to take a tram to your gate as it's a very sprawling airport. About 10 minutes after, my wife's phone rings in her pocket, so she picks it up and says hello. Now, this was long enough ago that a lot of phones all looked the same. There weren't all the different protective cases and things. Many phones looked alike. They were probably 60% the size of a normal smartphone today. They were just blue or red or black. The person calling was actually his own phone that my wife had picked up after security. What had happened? My wife had her phone in her purse. The guy just ahead of her had already put his bags on the belt, but forgot to take his phone out of his pocket. So when he goes through the scan, he triggers the alarm. They make him get out of line and empty his pockets. He decides it's a good idea to just put his phone into the same tray as my wife's purse, shoes, and belt. So he's now several people behind us in line, and when my wife picks up her things, she sees what she thinks is her phone in the tray and picks it up. She now unknowingly has her phone in her purse and this guy's phone in her pocket. A completely innocent mistake, if anything. So now the phone owner calls his phone and she picks it up. If he had just said, "Hey, we had a goof up here, you have my phone," everything would have been fine. Just would have met up to give him his phone back. Instead, he starts screaming at her about how she stole his phone and we better bring it back right now. She's a bit confused. For a moment, she thought it was her phone. We were both baffled. He continues to scream at her, so I take the phone and try to tell him it's no big deal, I can meet him and get him his phone back. He continues to call my wife a thief and demands to know where we are. He keeps screaming, "You will not have my phone, you thief!" So I told him what was going to happen next, hung up on him, and flushed his phone down a toilet. I was with OP all through this story up until the very end. Even though the guy was irate and very clueless for putting their phone in the same bucket and ending up in that situation to begin with, how are you gonna go and flush somebody's phone down the toilet because they were upset? You don't know the dude, you don't know what they're going through, what their day's going to be like. It's the airport, everybody's busy there, except for waiting for their darn flights all day. I feel like I just have too big of a heart, or would just feel way too guilty going and flushing a dude's phone like that. It's a bit much. Our next story is by I Have No Fish, Only Water. Won't cancel my internet unless you're unable to provide service? Okay. So when I was living in the city, I had a contract with my internet provider, Rogers for my fellow Canadians. After a year in my apartment, I decided to move in with my then boyfriend, now husband, on a farm. A farm on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. So I call to cancel my internet. I say, "I need to cancel, I'm moving." Them interrupting me say, "Your service moves with you. You signed a contract for X years and it only ends early if we're unable to provide service." I say, you are unable to provide service. I'm moving to a rural area. They say, not possible. We provide service to many rural communities. What's your new postal code? I provide it. They say, that's for town name. We have service in town name. I say, but I'm not living in town name. That's just my postal address. I'm living on a farm outside of town name. They repeat the contract speech with an additional offer of an absurd buyout fee if I want to cancel my contract early without cause. Cue malicious compliance. I say, fine. You know what? I would love high-speed internet instead of crappy satellite internet. When can you come? The install guy had to call me 3 times from the van. Twice because he was lost, and a third time because he was stuck in a snowdrift. When he finally arrived, it took him about 30 seconds to determine that there obviously is no infrastructure for high-speed internet. I offered him hot coffee for his trouble coming out, and he happily canceled my service free of charge and accepted my equipment return. Cost Rogers a 3 to 4 hour call out when you count the drive, just to try and keep one impossible contract. Don't you just love that in this case, it's literally because the ISP refuses to believe their customer? Someone who's paid for their services for however long OP has, they call and say, hey, I'm moving to a place where you clearly don't have the infrastructure, I need to cancel. The ISP basically says, don't you dare try to pull some wool over our eyes, you can't get out of our contract that easy. But if Rogers is like anything like the ISPs in America, they're not hurting for money, so the 3 to 4 call out probably didn't affect them too much. This next story is by Brother P. So you create a bogus account on my name and refuse to cancel until I pay the account? Okay, sounds like a good plan. My school was getting some work done on the HVAC system, and the contractor, hired by the district, not the school, needed some parts to complete the job. The parts vendor arranged to ship the parts to the school, and I was asked to meet the courier truck, not naming names but it rhymes with Dead Rex, after hours, and put the parts where the contractor would get them the next day. The parts came, the contractor made the fix, the HVAC worked, and all was well. A month later, a bill came from the courier service in the misspelled name of the school. It cited remote access fee of $195 and liftgate fee of $180. Add tax and the invoice totaled over $400. I passed the bill onto our facilities department with instructions to pass it on to the contractor. They did it, it was off my plate, and all was well. A month later, a bill came from the courier service in the misspelled name of the school. It cited remote access fee of $195 and a liftgate fee of $180 and a late payment charge of $30. Add tax and the invoice totaled over $430. I passed the bill onto our accounting department, CC'd the facilities department, and asked them to deal with it, and all was well. A month later, a bill came from the courier service. This went on for 6 months. Facilities didn't want to deal with it. Accounting didn't want to deal with it. The solution was for me to call and try to get the bill canceled. Gritting my teeth, I called their billing department and spent the next 10 minutes arguing with a thoroughly unpleasant collection guy. He explained that due to the difficulty with the delivery location, they opened an account in our name and issued the bill. He grew increasingly belligerent and insisted I pay or he would send it to collection. Despite this being a meaningless threat, I agreed and hung up. I went to my secretary and asked her for a check in the amount of the most recent invoice. I then asked her to open an account in the name of the courier service and created a account disputation fee in the amount of $400 and a telephone argument fee in the amount of $600 and referenced the account number on their invoice. I sent the check to their collections department and the invoice to their accounts payable department, and all was well. A month later, a letter came from the courier service. They canceled the invoice. I mean, from the get-go, they opened an account without authorization? That's looking past the fact that they misspelled the name of the school. You gotta love when anybody tries to shove these hidden shadow fees upon you and then hounds you and somehow expects you to actually pay those, even though you never agreed to those in the first place at all. Maybe these people do it because time and time again they get polite people or people who just don't understand or feel like there's no way out. But in these situations, there's very clear legal ground they're violating here. So just force their hand like OP did. Basically, just don't give in. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.